Hello, class. Hope you're doing well and having a great Wednesday, and that you have already taken attendance, that you've greeted each other, and you've thrown the ball around a little bit to see how everybody's doing before you watch this video like we have done in the past. We are going to finish up our short story with Ray Bradbury today, and you should be on question number 15 in your packet, although it's a little bit different numbering than the questions that are in the book. In the text that you should have in front of you, it should be listed as number 11. How has Harry's thinking changed, with the page number 220. So that's where we left off, and it has changed quite a bit in these last couple readings that we've done. At the beginning of the story, we can remember that Mr. Bittering wanted to head back to Earth as soon as he stepped off that shuttle, does not like his surroundings on Mars, doesn't feel like a Martian, and wants to go right back to Earth. That doesn't happen. They wait a little too long. We hear the news break in that second reading that we did that there has been atomic warfare back on Earth and that there is no going back to New York, at least for a while. So they are here for a while, and they have to make do with that. Mr. Bittering does not accept that, and in fact he starts to build his own rocket ship, almost like Noah building his own ark, with the whole community gathered around laughing at him, thinking he's a bit insane. So that is his approach to this, at least for a while. And now, in this last reading that we've done together, we see a slight change in his mentality. As the group of settlers, or visitors, now become settlers, and they go out into the countryside, into what they call a villa, which is defined for you in the last page that we read, a country or suburban residence. They are becoming more like locals. They don't plan on going back home. They have no intention of returning to what they once knew. They're now trying to assimilate and make their lives here on Mars the best that they can. They don't see any other option. Mr. Bittering, again, rebels against that for some time, but in the very last part that we read, we see him start to adapt, right? First, there's that scene where he's in the water and it's all rushing over him, and he feels really small. Maybe you can think of a time when you felt small, when you first saw the ocean, or you were swimming in the ocean, or you were scuba diving, maybe, I don't know. Other people feel this sensation when they're mountain climbing and they've just reached the summit. I totally have felt that way. When you look over and you can see every other mountain in the range, you can see for miles and miles, and you just realize that you are very tiny in a huge world. Maybe you get that feeling when you look at the stars. But he feels that when he's in the water, and that starts to change his mentality, like I said before, about his place on Mars. What is he going to do? So they persuade him in this last part to put off the rocket construction and just begin to live on Mars, and put it off till the autumn, they say. That's where we are last time, and that's where we'll pick it up right now. So, page 220. Autumn would be best, he thought. Plenty of time then. No, cried part of himself deep down, put away, locked tight, suffocating. No, no! In the autumn, he said. Come on, Harry, they all said. Yes, he said, feeling his flesh melt in the hot liquid air. Yes, in the autumn. I'll begin work again then. I got a villa near the Tierra Canal, said someone. You mean the Roosevelt Canal, don't you? Tierra, the old Martian name. But on the map, forget the map, it's Tierra now. Now I found a place in the Pelan Mountains. You mean the Rockefeller Range, said Bittering. I mean the Pelan Mountains, said Sam. Yeah, said Bittering, buried in the hot, swarming air. The Pelan Mountains. Everyone worked at loading the truck in the hot, still afternoon of the next day. Laura, Dan, and David carried packages, or as they preferred to be known, Tatil, Linnell, and Ver carried packages. The furniture was abandoned in the little white cottage. It looked just fine in Boston, said the mother, and here in the cottage. But up at the villa? No, we'll get it when we come back in the autumn. Bittering himself was quiet. I've some ideas on furniture for the villa, he said after a time. Big, lazy furniture. What about your encyclopedia? You're taking it along, surely? Mr. Bittering glanced away. I'll come and get it next week. They turned to their daughter. What about your New York dresses? The bewildered girl stared. Why, I don't want them anymore. They shut off the gas, the water, they locked the doors and walked away. Father peered into the truck. Gosh, we're not taking much, he said. Considering all we brought to Mars, this is only a handful. He started the truck. Looking at the small white cottage for a long moment, he was filled with a desire to rush into it, to touch it, say goodbye to it, for he felt as if he were going away on a long journey, leaving something to which he could never quite return, never understand again. Just then, Sam and his family drove by in another truck. Hi, Bittering. Here we go. The truck swung down the ancient highway out of town. There were 60 others traveling in the same direction, the town filled with a silent, heavy dust from their passage. The canal waters lay blue in the sun, and a quiet wind moved in the strange trees. Goodbye, town, said Mr. Bittering. Goodbye, goodbye, said the family, waving to it. They did not look back again. Summer burned the canals dry. Summer moved like flame upon the meadows. In the empty earth settlement, the painted houses flaked and peeled. Rubber tires upon which children had swung in backyards hung suspended like stopped clock pendulums in the blazing air. At the metal shop, the rocket frame began to rust. In the quiet autumn, Mr. Bittering stood, very dark now, very golden-eyed, upon the slope of his villa, looking at the valley. It's time to go back, said Cora. Yes, but we're not going, he said quietly. There's nothing there anymore. Your books, she said, your fine clothes. Your Lillis and your fine war ule re, she said. The town's empty. No one's going back, he said. There's no reason to, none at all. The daughter wove tapestries, and the sons played songs on ancient flutes and pipes, their laughter echoing in the marble villa. Mr. Bittering gazed at the earth settlement far away in the low valley. Such odd, such ridiculous houses the earth people built. They didn't know any better, his wife mused. Such ugly people. I'm glad they've gone. They both looked at each other, startled by all they had just finished saying. They laughed. I'm going to pause here. So in this portion of the story, we see a big twist in Mr. Bittering's attitude, right? The sort of attributes that they give to Earth people, which of course they are. They just came from Earth, and now they look back at Earthlings as being inferior people because of their new location, their new furniture, their new information. They even look at the encyclopedia as if it's not very helpful. And I know we don't use encyclopedias much, but we certainly use things like Wikipedia when we need to find quick information, or dictionaries. All of these things, they matter immensely to us because they describe the world around us. They help us make sense of the world. But what happens if you leave that world, right? What happens if the world changes dramatically? Then is your dictionary or your encyclopedia going to be as useful? Maybe not. But does that give you a right to call them stupid or ugly, those ugly people, just because you're a little bit removed from them? So now I want you to think back to your own life. When is it that you have also had that same mentality that Mr. Bittering adopts at the end of this story towards Earthlings? When have you had a similar attitude towards maybe family relatives that are 2 generations older than you? So grandparents and their brothers and sisters, like your great aunts and great uncles. Is there something that you have noticed about their habits? Maybe they don't have a cell phone. Maybe they read the newspaper with actual paper and not on a computer. Maybe they don't use even the internet. I know some people that are like that. They're pretty amazing. But is there a habit that they have that you think is ridiculous and it kind of annoys you, and you even look at them with a little bit of contempt because they don't change their ways? I want you to talk to the people around you for a little bit, and as a class, discuss what it is that that person who's older than you does that seems to irritate you because it's different than how we live today. All right, pause the video now and go ahead and share. All right, we are ready to continue reading now. I just wanted to point out one more thing before we dive in. There's a one-sentence paragraph on 220 that says, "At the metal shop, the rocket frame began to rust. This project has been abandoned. The rocket ship to get back to Earth," meaning he's left his attempts there to sort of recreate what he once had, and now he's going further into the Martian territory to the villas. So that's a decisive step. Also, I apologize for not knowing how to pronounce Martian. Notice that there's 3 L's in that word, L-L-L-E-S. Your guess is as good as mine for how to pronounce that. Okay, now we are ready to go. Where did they go, he wondered. He glanced at his wife. She was golden and slender as his daughter. She looked at him, and he seemed almost as young as their eldest son. "I don't know," she said. "We'll go back to town maybe next year, or the year after, or the year after that," he said calmly. "Now, I'm warm. How about taking a swim?" They turned their backs to the valley. Arm in arm, they walked silently down a path of clear running spring water. 5 years later, a rocket fell out of the sky. It lay steaming in the valley. Men leaped out of it shouting, "We won the war on Earth! We're here to rescue you! Hey!" But the American-built town of cottages, peach trees, and theaters was silent. They found a flimsy rocket frame rusting in an empty shop. The rocket men searched the hills. The captain established headquarters in an abandoned bar. His lieutenant came back to report. "The town's empty, but we found native life in the hills, sir. Dark people, yellow eyes, Martians, very friendly. We talked a bit, not much. They learned English fast. I'm sure our relations will be most friendly with them, sir." "Dark, eh?" mused the captain. "How many?" 600-800, I'd say, living in those marble ruins in the hills, sir. Tall, healthy, beautiful women. Did they tell you what became of the men and women who built this Earth settlement, Lieutenant? They hadn't the foggiest notion of what happened to this town or its people. Strange. You think those Martians killed them? They looked surprisingly peaceful. Chances are a plague did this town in, sir. All right, twist at the end, right? Let's pause to consider this next question. So, in this portion, there's been a 5-year gap, and clearly a lot has happened in that 5-year gap because the people aren't even recognizable anymore. They're gone out of that initial city that they were building in when they landed, and they do recall some English, but it says they learned the English, and they were speaking in the Martian language. So that's some quick sort of change culturally in what was going on there. But the war is over, and if they had only stayed in place, they would have had an opportunity to go back to their original culture now. But we're told that they were completely different now and viewed as Martians. So that leaves us with the question, number 13. What does the lieutenant reveal about the Earth settlement and its people? You should be able to answer that now on your own. So this sort of reacquaintance with other Earth people, you'd think would be a grand reunion with those who that had just come, but it's actually, they seem almost like strangers here. They describe their appearance, which isn't very human-like anymore. Now the whole golden-eyed thing has come to fruition and is who they are now. And so they're almost unrecognizable. Okay, let's continue. Perhaps, I suppose, this is one of those mysteries we'll never solve. One of those mysteries you read about. That's kind of a joke. The captain looked at the room, the dusty windows, the blue mountains rising beyond, the canals moving in the light, and he heard the soft wind in the air. He shivered. Then recovering, he tapped a large fresh map he had thumbtacked to the top of an empty table. "Lots to be done, Lieutenant." His voice droned on and quietly on as the sun sank behind the blue hills. "New settlements, mining sites, minerals to be looked for, bacteriological specimens taken, the work, all the work, and the old records were lost. We'll have a job of remapping to do, renaming the mountains and rivers as such and such. Calls for a little imagination. What do you think of naming those mountains the Lincoln Mountains? This canal the Washington Canal? Those hills, we can name those hills for you, Lieutenant. Diplomacy. And you, for a favor, might name a town for me. Polishing the apple. And why not make this the Einstein Valley? And farther over, are you listening, Lieutenant?" The lieutenant snapped his gaze from the blue color and the quiet mist of the hills far beyond the town. "What? Oh, yes, sir." Okay, that's the end of our story. So first I want you to just think about it, sit with yourself, sit with your thoughts, and start to process what this story is all about. A theme, of course, is a message in this story, and it's not immediately apparent what that message is. So I want you to pause the video, and I want you to, as a class, discuss what you think the purpose of this story is after you've had a little bit of time to think to yourself about what you think it may be. All right, I'll hear from you after. Good. I'm sure you had a lot of interesting input there, and I'd love to hear more of that when I get back in person, just to see what you thought the purpose of the story was. For me, one of the main ideas I see coming through in this story is that we humans are very localized people. We have roots where we grow up, right? You guys are from Chanhassen or Eden Prairie. I'm from Eden Prairie, or some nearby town. But that home means something to you. It has shaped who you are, whether you believe it or not. And so has your family. So has your family and your friends. All of those contribute to what it means to be you. And so when you move away from this town that you've grown up in, you'll probably miss it a lot. You'll be a little bit homesick. You'll try to hold on to parts of it even when you leave, because it's who you are. But then when you get to college or somewhere far away, or you move, your family has to move because of work, you'll actually start to grow new roots. It won't be like you're forever agonizing over your loss of your hometown. You'll still miss it a little bit, but you will naturally start to put down new roots in your new home. We are adaptable people, and we learn to get along with the people around us. And sometimes that can be bad, right? Because we want to have people like us, impress them. We want to always be redefining ourselves. And you have to make sure that you are adapting to the right place, because we can adapt not just to better places, but we can also change our ways in negative directions in order to impress people in a new location. I leave it to you to decide whether the Bitterings were right to assimilate into this Martian culture, if you think that was a good step for them to take, or if you think they should sort of hold on to what they once knew on Earth and wait for that rocket ship to come 5 years later. That would be an excellent thing for you to discuss now as a class. And then after that, we will continue with our post-reading exercises. All right, so the first of our post-reading exercises is actually on the very back of your packet. So you'll see a plot circle, a plot chart. And most every other plot chart you've looked at has been, maybe it's been a pyramid shape with the rising action leading you to the top where there's the climax, and then the falling action and the resolution. That is a pretty traditional chart for a story to take. Now, Bradbury is doing some interesting stuff here with a circular story chart. What that means is that the whole plot is circular. And that's trying to say that what happens at the end of the story is eerily familiar to what you had at the beginning of the story. It's almost like you just ran in a big loop and now you're back to where you started and the story is repeating itself. It's not a beginning to an end, it's a beginning to a second beginning. And that's what's unique about this story. So, yes, there is another spaceship that lands on Mars and tries to start naming the place and naming all of the different sort of structures that have been built there with new names. The naming of names is another way this story is referred to. So it starts to feel like a broken record that is going over and over and over, and that's intentional. So I want you to try map out on this map where all of these parts fall into the story. Now, there are two ways of doing this. If you are an artsy person and you want a challenge, then go grab a scissors if you have it in your locker. I don't have enough for everybody to pass out. So if you have your own scissors and glue, then you can cut out all of these tiles. Pick one place to start on here. It doesn't matter which one, any of them, because it's a circle. And go in order so that you follow the arrows. There we go. Follow the little arrows, pasting down where you think that each step should go. Now, there are more steps than there are spaces in the chart. Why do you think that is? It's because the story starts to repeat itself. So you can put on more than one tile on a square. There will be, I believe, 2 of them that overlap, where there's not just one of these squares that goes on it, but 2 that go on it. If you don't have scissors and glue, that's not a problem. You'll just you'll copy the text from these bottom ones and you'll write them in on the space in this chart. So arrange all of these steps from the story in the order that you think they go in and complete it in this chart above in order, the appropriate order of the story. And remember that since it's circular and it repeats, at least 1 or 2 of these squares will have not just 1 tile, but 2 tiles that go on it, that you're either writing in or you're pasting on there. Okay. Please take probably 10, if it goes over 10, that's okay, minutes to complete this, and then resume the video for the next activity that will finish out your class. All right. If I take it you had a little more class time if you're this far into the video. If not, we'll just, it's okay, we'll do this in the next time I see you. But in this page, there's a paragraph from an article that paints a really interesting parallel to the story that we just read. It's almost freaky how closely these relate. This is a historical article, not just another fiction story that we're going to read, but something that actually happened. So I'm going to read it for you now, and then you'll start to see the connections. In 1587, a group of around 115 British settlers arrived on Roanoke Island, building a settlement off of the coast of present-day North Carolina. Later that year, the governor John White left the colony, including his wife, daughter, and infant granddaughter, to return to England to gather desperately needed supplies. However, White's return to the Roanoke colony in the Americas was delayed due to England's involvement in a war. When White finally arrived in 1590, he found no trace of the colony or its inhabitants. Freaky, right? The only clue left behind was a single word, Croatoan, carved into a wooden post. Croatoan was the name of a local tribe of Native Americans. To this day, the fate of the lost colony of Roanoke remains one of the biggest mysteries in American history. Did you know? Compare the true story of the lost colony of Roanoke to the fictional Dark They Were and Golden-Eyed, the one that we just read. Identify at least 2 similarities between the 2 stories. Then answer the question. Based on the conclusion of his story, Dark They Were and Golden-Eyed, what do you think Ray Bradbury would say happened to the settlers of the lost colony of Roanoke? So I'd love to hear your own opinion about what happened there, but for the sake of this prompt, try to make connections back to Ray Bradbury's story, and then take a guess at what you think Ray would say if he read that. What do you think his prediction would be happen to those people on Roanoke? With that, the class is coming to an end. If somehow you still have time left over and you're looking for something to do, I guess you have earned your time to play some room ball. So I'll let you finish with that if you have already finished this assignment and it's in good condition so that we can collect it when I get back in person. There are a couple pages that we didn't get to that we will do when I get back. So that is all for now, and I hope you have a wonderful week.